please be upstanding for His Worship the Mayor.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, if I can just remind you before we start the meeting that this is a meeting that's going to be recorded for subsequent broadcast on the authority's internet site, and the images and recording may also be used for training purposes within the authority. So please can everybody be aware of that in making any comments. Can everybody please indicate to speak through the chair so that you can then speak with your microphone turned on, because if your microphone isn't turned on then the recording equipment won't pick you up. Can everybody please turn off their mobile phones, because even if they're on silent they will still interfere with the recording system. And can I just remind those in the public gallery that by being in the public gallery you will also be on the recording equipment, and that we are taking your presence and implied consent to that recording. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we go to item 1, apologies for absence?
Councillor Chris Barry, Mr Mayor, and for members who are not aware, he's currently incapacitated in hospital after undergone an emergency appendectomy a couple of days ago. He's now got an infected wound and feeling pretty miserable.
It's taken him 2 days to say the word appendectomy.
Still can't spell it.
Councillor Margaret Davis.
Councillor Tom Lewis.
Okay, thank you very much. We go to item number 2, declarations of interest. So now we go to the open session. Item number 3 of the committee reports, issuing of a section 188 Trade Unions and Labour Relations Act 1992, the formal consultation, a report of the Chief Executive. I believe the leader is taking this.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Mr Mayor, members of Council are all too well aware of the Westminster Government's mission to reduce public spending, despite being able to find billions of pounds for other global adventures. Mr Mayor, members will also be aware that despite having to make around £8 million worth of savings over the past 2 years, with a staff reduction of 158 in the last year, we have so far undertaken this process through voluntary redundancy and voluntary early retirement. Of the 158 reductions, 144 have been through voluntary means, with 14 through compulsory means. Mr Mayor, I've also taken the opportunity of circulating a letter to all members this evening. It's been sent out today. It is an open letter from the leader of the WLGA, my good friend Bob Weldon, and the 2 deputy leaders, Councillor Alan Thomas and Councillor Aaron Shotton. And I think this just sort of typifies the frustration that local government has at this moment in time, being constantly underfunded. And some of the information that we're getting out now is that local government has in fact been funding has been reduced in local government by 51% since 2010. That is indeed a staggering figure. I would like to quote from the letter, Mr Mayor, if I can, and it's a quote from the First Minister himself when he says, "We can never lose sight of the fact that these are cuts conceived not in our council chambers, not in the Senedd building, but in a Tory treasury in Whitehall. Another 5 years of this, and there won't be any choices at all, no matter how difficult the decisions. It won't be libraries and leisure centres versus social services and playgroups. It will be everything." So I just wanted to share that letter with members this evening. Mr Mayor, moving on to the detail of the report, in section 3.1 through to 3.5 of the report, the rationale for the change programme is set out, and although we are not currently in a position where we will know exactly how much we need to save in the next 2 years, despite the fact we've had the spending review today, that'll have to be worked through in the next several weeks before we know exactly what the implications are. Following meetings I've had with the First Minister, the Minister for Public Services, other leaders from across Wales, and our senior management team, it is estimated that we are very likely to have a budget deficit of around £10 million. This, unfortunately and inevitably, means a further reduction in services, with the consequential impact and reduction in our staffing levels. Mr Mayor, we'll continue to work with our trade union colleagues to do whatever we can to protect our staff and to mitigate redundancies wherever possible. And to give an example of this, and it's been highlighted today in the local paper, we now have an agreement with Rhondda and Taff County Borough Council whereby any vacancies either in Merthyr, Tydfil or RCT will be offered to staff in the other authority as and when they become vacant. Returning, Mr Mayor, to 1.4 of the report, members will note the legal requirement to formally notify the trade unions through a formal 188 letter if more than 20 jobs are going to be affected. Quite clearly, given the projected deficit, there could be between 160 and 200 jobs affected, and the trade unions and all members of staff are now fully aware and understanding of the situation following a series of roadshows by the Chief Executive only a couple of weeks ago. Mr Mayor, Council will note from section 4 of the report that all directly employed staff will be affected by the proposals. Section 5 of the report sets out the method for achieving the redundancies, and section 6 the timeline of consultation. It will be noted from section 7 of the report there are no financial implications of issuing of the section 188 and that any implications arising from the implementation of the change programme will be reported as and when they're known. Mr Mayor, the recommendations are set out in section 2 on page 2 of the report, and I move that in 2.1 a slight amendment to read the issuing of the issuing of an initial 188 notice at the earliest opportunity be approved. 2.2 following the issuing of the section 188, the immediate commencement of formal consultation begin with the recognised trade unions on the proposals for the redundancies be approved. 2.3 delegated authority be given to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Leader of the Council, and in his absence the Deputy Leader, to issue further section 188 notices as required. And 2.4 delegated authority is given to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Leader of the Council, and in his absence the Deputy Leader, to consider alternative options that may be raised by the trade unions consultation group to mitigate redundancies. I so move.
Mr Mayor, I second the motion.
Have we any questions? Councillor Richard.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Recommendation 2.4, I'm just seeking clarification and assurance from the Leader that it will only be to consider alternative options, and that anything that goes further than that will be brought back before full council. I think I toned that slightly as a question, I hope.
Yeah, sorry, Richard, can you please do that?
Yeah, sorry, it's recommendation 2.4. The second line, it says to consider alternative options, in other words, delegated authority. I'm just seeking your assurance that any considerations will then be brought back before full council. It's not a decision-making process, it is only to consider proposals.
Yeah, the reason for that's in there, Richard, that if that by going through this process, alternative options may be raised that will mitigate any of the redundancies, that we can actually crack on with that without bringing them back. Any policy or anything that needs to be brought back to council will be brought back, as will several reports next week highlighting some of the proposals, and that's the earliest time that we can do that. So we'll be doing that as early as next Wednesday.
Councillor Thomas.
A second question. The paragraph 3.4 refers to the operating model assessment. As far as I'm aware, that's not been made available to full council. Certainly not, I have not seen it. I just would ask that the leader make it available to us electronically, perhaps, so that at least everybody can read it.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I don't have any problem with that. I'm sure we can make that available.
So, any other further questions? Councillor Thomas?
Sorry, they're flowing so freely. Just an explanation, this one, 6.1. The timeline of consultation, 45-day consultation, is that 45 working days or is it 45 consecutive days? Just for clarity. It is consecutive. Okay, thanks.
Any other further questions? Comments? Can we put it to the vote, please? And that's unanimous. We'll go on to item number 4, redundancy policy and redeployment policy. To consider a report of the Chief Executive. I believe it's Councillor Phil Williams taking it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Turning you to page 5 of the report, and you can see the summary is that the council has actually operated a redundancy policy and joint redeployment policy for some time. Last updated in 2014. 1.4 sets out that the fact that there is a new policy before us this evening, giving more details on aspects of the process where there was really nothing being said previously. It was silent. And that includes definition of a suitable alternative job in employment, redeployment rather, clarity on what occurs if an employee takes sick or annual leave during redeployment, that's in there as well, and how to manage grievances related to redundancy. 1.5 explains that the policy has now been split into 2 documents, and over the page on page 6 you can see we've got the redundancy policy and the redeployment policy. And paragraph 3.3, the key changes to the redeployment policy are pay protection has gone from protection on all redeployment for 1 year gradual reflection to pay protection only if the employee is redeployed to a job 1 grade down from their substantive post. The paragraph 3.5 says that both policies have been consulted on with the trades unions and verified by PwC. I can report that this afternoon the leader and I and the Chief Executive met with the trades unions, and they confirmed that they were content with the 2 policies, other than in respect of paragraph 3.3 in this report, where, as it says there, pay protection will now only apply if an employee is redeployed to a job 1 grade down. Up until today, basically, the situation has been if somebody has been redeployed 3 or 4 grades down, they've had protection at the level that they were previously on. That is really unaffordable, and after discussion with the trades unions, we did discuss that as a point, and that provision will still apply. So they wanted me to pass on their unease or dissatisfaction with that particular change, but that's the only change that they really had any concerns about. Bearing that in mind, Chair, the recommendation on page 6 is that the updated redundancy policy be approved and that the updated redeployment policy be approved. Subject to questions and comments, I move.
Mr. Mayor, I second that.
Have we any questions? Any comments? Can we put that to the vote, please? And that's unanimous. We now have 2 other further reports before you. The first one is the Human Resources Review to consider a report of the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. These obviously are table reports and late reports, so can I ask Caris to take us through the report, please, so members are quite comfortable in what's being said?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. This matter has been brought before you as an urgent report, and you can see from the summary the reason why there needs to be a change in the management of the HR department, and that is because Lisa Jones has indicated that she's going to be leaving and moving on to pursue other projects. You can see from the body of the report reference to the substantial amount of work that Lisa has done around the reorganisation of the HR function to bring it more into line with the clear outcomes focus that the local authority is now trying to achieve. There was a review by the Welsh Audit Office, and the urgency in this matter now comes as a result of the fact that WAO will be returning in January of next year. And they will need to be satisfied that we've made progress against the action plan which Lisa has drawn up and has been enacting over the period of the last year and a bit. And we'll also need to satisfy them that there is stability within that service and that we're able to deliver an HR service which is fit for purpose in these very difficult times. So having reviewed that position with the Chief Executive, he takes the view that there should be a replacement as a head of the HR, but not in the same role entirely as that which Lisa has occupied. And his proposal is that the HR service should come under the management of the Legal and Democratic Service, and that it should then have an HR manager appointed who will more directly run the service. It's proposed that that should take place for an initial period of 6 months, firstly so that we can satisfy WAO that there is a stable management structure in place, and then that we can review the position to identify how we can deal with that moving forward. We are also confident that there are staff resources within the authority that will enable us to appoint from an internal advertisement without having to go out to external advertisement. I should just refer members to paragraph 4 with regard to financial implications, because we do anticipate that there will be some budget savings in the new structure that we're going to identify, but we're not in a position at the moment to give you the full detail of that. We'll be able to provide that to you in due course. So that's the position, and perhaps I can hand over to Councillor Phil Williams to deal with the recommendations.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the explanation, Caris, and the going through the report in detail. So the recommendation is on the second page. 2.1 is that the new post of HR manager be advertised internally. 2.2, the corporate director, place and transformation, and the head of legal and democratic services be authorised to appoint to the post for an initial period of 6 months. And 2.3, the HR function be managed by the head of legal and democratic services. If you didn't know that was, that's Caris. So, subject to questions and comments, I move.
Councillor Clive Jones.
I understand, Mr Mayor, that the reason for this post being advertised internally, and I also understand, because I spoke to Lisa just before the council meeting started, that she's kindly agreed to stay with us until the end of March. How long will it take to make this? I understand that it'll be far quicker than if the post had been, for example, advertised externally. But I think we need to have that officer, he or she, in post as soon as possible, so that the shadowing can take place and have the benefit of the officer who's in post there at the moment. So how long will that process take, and when do you think the appointment will be made?
I would hope, if members agree the recommendations in the report, that we will be able to put an advert out by the end of the week, and that we will, because it's an internal advertisement, I would hope that we will be able to have somebody in place by Christmas time.
Councillor Chaplin.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I assume that when the new HR manager is appointed, that during the period that he or she will be in charge, that she will receive an additional pay.
Yes, I've been in discussion with the Chief Executive about that, and we do have a pay grade in mind. Clearly it will depend on the candidate and the quality of the candidate, but we do have a pay grade or a pay range in mind, and yes, it will amount, for whomsoever is successful of the internal candidate, it would amount to a pay increase.
Councillor Richard Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question with a hidden meaning in a way, and I won't explain the hidden meaning, but one assumes that if there is no one successful in the local authority, what will happen then?
It would then have to be advertised externally, and we would then have to consider recruitment externally, and that would carry with it costs. We'd also then have to gauge the market and see whether we were going to be able to recruit at the level that we are offering the funding. I would anticipate that we would, even if we did have to go externally. But it will be something that we'll have to consider very carefully before we would go externally, and if there were to be any change in the plan that we were putting forward, we'd bring back a different report to council to advise members of what we'd needed to consider as any change.
Can I go to the leader?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. In part answer to Councillor Richard Thomas's question, Richard, I'll keep you fully informed, obviously, as Leader of the Opposition, as to where we are in this process. And perhaps you might want to have a chat with me outside of the meeting today to explain where we're going. Well, I'll leave that to you. Either way will suit me fine. But we've got an idea where this process could take us, and I think you need to be made aware of it. But obviously, I haven't had the opportunity this evening, so I'll do that outside.
Councillor Alan Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if I caught Kerris correctly when you were talking about the salary grade of the post, and you said that if the successful applicant, then you would decide the salary. No, or the salary be decided beforehand, before the advert goes out?
We have a salary in mind, but there'll have to be job evaluation of the post once we've identified the exact duties attached to the post. So, and then it will be as to who is successful. If it's an internal candidate, where they are currently on the internal salary scale, the range that would be available at that salary. So there are some imponderables, but it would be over a very small amount, and it will be advertised at a salary.
It will be advertised?
Yes.
Sorry. It will be advertised with a salary in the advert. That's fine. Yeah, okay.
Any further questions? Any comments? Councillor Richard Thomas.
Can I get in first with my compliments this evening, Mr. Mayor, because Lisa will be greatly missed. Her skill and expertise has been very obvious to me as a Chair of Governors, particularly over the last few months, and she will be missed not least for that and her smile and charm.
Any further comments? So I'll put it to the vote.
Mayor, we haven't had a seconder yet. Can I second the recommendation?
Sorry. Right, now we'll put it to the vote. And that's unanimous. The next item will be section 100. Can I get somebody to propose that, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, can I move that we invoke section 100 of the Local Government Act?
Second, Mr. Mayor.
And it's item number 5 to deal with other urgent business or correspondence, and I have none. And item number 6 to receive communications from His Worship the Mayor. I have none. So I'd like to wish you all Yes, I agree with you there. So, councillors, would you like to stand for a minute's silence?
Mr. Mayor, before we do that, seeing as we're going to mark this moment for Louise, I was going to leave it until the proper full council next week. But no, we'll do it now. Seeing as you raised it. But I did want to raise the issue as well of the incidents in Paris of a couple of weeks ago, and I was going to leave that until next week as well. But we can mark that now, following on the tragic occurrences that happened in Paris only 2 weeks ago as well. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. So as I said, that was item number 6, and I have no other communication, so thank you very much and good night.